look at the structure of our agriculture, the structure will tell you whether the smallholder farmer is an important player or not. We have up to 70% of our produce in the country coming from the smallholder farmer.
Mm-hmm.
So that is domestic production. And the rest is by commercial farming. So if you have a large proportion of your production coming from a certain group, that is the smallholder farmers, certainly they are very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
Any transformation in that sector will have to start from them.
Mm.
So one will now ask, is it a recent development or is it a recent knowledge that the smallholder farmer occupies this important position in the agricultural sector? The answer is no. We are aware of this for many years. Now, we then move to the next stage. What did we then do to ensure that the most important stakeholder and farmer in the agricultural sector is taken care of? And you can see that from the answer is coming from the nature of the policies.
Mm-hmm.
If we took the Planting for Food and Jobs program, you could see that it was mainly focused on smallholder farmers.
Mm.
So that underscored how the smallholder farmer was considered as important under that policy. And as some of us always say, policy is one thing, outcomes is another. You can have very good policies, but the outcomes may not be good enough. So we should not celebrate policies, or even if we celebrate policy, we should not stop at that point.
Mm-hmm.
We should follow up and make sure that the policy delivers on its objectives, on its intentions. Outcomes speak louder than the policy itself. But the argument is that there cannot be outcomes or good outcomes when the policy is not good. So, but to measure whether a policy is good or not, we should look at the outcomes. Because the policy is only a means to an end. We should be looking at the end. That is why when you look at the Planting for Food and Jobs program, even though it focuses on smallholder farmers, it focuses on two major objectives: to provide enough food for the people of this country and for industry, and also to provide jobs. It ended up not achieving that. And that's where some of us, our concern was. Then we can now look at why it did not succeed, so that we can learn lessons from it to make sure that subsequent policies, as we have today, do not suffer the same fate like the Planting for Food and Jobs and previous policies suffered.
Mm. What would you say was one key factor that led to the failure of Planting for Food and Jobs?
See, because you said one failure.
Just one.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult. Because production is incomplete until the food gets to the table of the consumer. So you may need to look at a number of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Our major, when it comes to the, so you can divide the whole process or chain into three: production, and then post-harvest losses, and then market. So if you look at the production part of it, It failed because the inputs that were meant for the farmers, most of the inputs did not get to the farmers, like the fertilizers and then the certified seed. And some of these fertilizers were smuggled out the country.
Were stolen?
And they were smuggled out of the country.
Okay.
They didn't get to the farmers. So, but then you now look at those that got, the inputs that got to the farmers, and when the farmers produced, what then happened? We could not immediately evacuate this food from the farm gates to the markets.
Mm.
And you could see that along the line, the then Minister for Agriculture, Honorable Dr. Afriye Akoto, had to come out with a policy to go to Western North to bring plantain and other foodstuffs to come and sell in Accra. That was to tell you that where there's production, we were unable to bring those foodstuffs to the urban centers where it was most needed.
Mm-hmm.
So that was it. So then that's now linked to post-harvest losses.
Mm-hmm.
Because once the farmers were unable to bring their foodstuffs to the market centers, it got rotten. So post-harvest loss became very huge.
Mm.
Then above all, the market was not there. And when we say the market is not there, it's not just about the physical places, like you talk about Agogloshi, Malata, you talk about KJTR. No, those physical markets were there. But whilst we were producing, there was another policy of government that increased importation of the same things that we produce here into the country. And you would recall that in 2019, the government came out with the discounted benchmark value policy to encourage certain imports into the country by way of giving them 50% of their tax duty. The duty that they have to pay on the imports, 50% of it was given back to them or was waived. So we had an inflow of cheap imports into the country and then made the domestic producers unable to compete with them in the domestic market in terms of prices. So all these things put together, made the policy to fail. So from production level, from post-harvest losses, and then also with on the import side. Even though there were measures, there were policies to make sure that we do not get post-harvest losses, and then also to get market, because this school feeding program, where it was supposed to mop up foodstuffs from the various districts to feed the SHS people, it did not work. And then Buffer Stock Company, which was to buy off foods that could not be sold in the market, the Buffer Stock Company did not have money to do so. So even though there were these policies and institutions to ensure that there was no post-harvest losses, or post-harvest losses were minimized, and the market was created, they never worked well. So again, it is not the absence of the policies, but it's about the way we implement the policies.
So I'm looking at the processes leading to policy conceptualization and ultimately coming out with the policy itself. At what point were you, at the time that you were leading the General Agricultural Workers Union, at what point were you engaged? Because I'm looking at a broader stakeholder consultation that will lead to the buy-in of all of the stakeholders that are involved within that particular value chain. At what point were you involved?
Well, I think that there are two ways, or there are two types of policies. There is one policy that will require the broader consultation of stakeholders, because you need to tease out their knowledge to make the policy, owned by all of them.
Mm-hmm.
There are some policies you don't necessarily need to do that level of consultation. Yet the policy will be good, and then they will accept it. So, because we also have our own work to do, we were not involved in all the conceptualization and development of all the policies. But some of them, we were invited to participate, share our views after the policy has been drafted, so that the final one will now incorporate our views. We did that. So the major thing is not about the policy, like I did indicate. Most of our policies were good, but the implementation has been poor. For instance, if they say they are going to build the Polvo multipurpose dams,
mm-hmm.
they don't need to consult us, and we don't need to be part of that consultation.
Mm.
It's a policy that we readily accept, whether you were invited to be part of the development of it or not. What was most important was for the dam to be built. You see, so it is our implementation. We are bad managers.
Is it
when it comes to implementation?
Council, and this is I'm still thinking about it.
Yes.
Is it stemming from our lack of understanding of the policy itself, or what? Because if you truly understand what a policy is, you'll be able to implement it to the latter.
Well, we don't lack technical capacity to implement. No, I don't think that we don't lack it. But the thing is this: there are two things that make our policies to fail. One, we don't implement the policy to the letter. It means from beginning to the end. And that is why you see some policies that are left along the line.
Mm-hmm.
And a very good example is about infrastructure. If sometimes if you go around, you see some infrastructure for some institutions that have been started, and then they are abandoned.
True.
So first, the policy must, when you start it, you must implement to the letter. It means to the end. And we have the tangent of abandoning policies along the line. As Ghanaians, we have that tangent. So that's one. The other thing is, we implement the policy according to specification. You see? So if the policy says that you should build a 10-story, don't along the line build 5-story. So we should implement the policy according to its specifications. These are two major things that we fail as a country. And then we create cost. And if you take the example of building a house, until the house is completed for you to live in or to rent it out, it becomes a waste if you don't complete it.
True.
Because all the money you have sunk there is going to waste. And the Polvo Dam is also another good example. We were told about $12 million was spent for mobilization and the rest. That money is already gone. And then the dam is not been built. So we have created costs, we've spent money, and yet we have nothing to show for it. Because we didn't complete the whole project by building the dam. So these are the reasons why we fail. Not that we don't have the technical capacity to implement the policies, but it's because No one is held accountable for failures in this country. Generally, people get away when they do the wrong things. I ask today, are there people who are supposed to be accounted to us why we spent about 4 billion Ghana cedis for planting for food and jobs, and yet today we have nothing or little to show for it? Who is accounting for that? Are we holding people accountable? If we don't do that, it means that if they give another person the authority or the responsibility to implement a structure or a policy, and then the person does not succeed, and he will not account to anybody, and yet costs would have been incurred.
True.
So this is the reason why I think that we do not get it right, and we need to strengthen the accountability part of it. Those who are to implement policies, they must account for why they have failed. And if they are found culpable, they should be, disciplined for that, sanctions and punished for that, according to law.
My final question would be, how do we reconceptualize agriculture and properly situate smallholder farmers in the reconceptualization to ensure we have sustainable production and reduce the mentioning of food insecurity in the country?
Well, we need to appreciate that the smallholder farmers are huge and they are dispersed around the entire country. It's sometimes very difficult to rate them. You can't count all the individual farmers to be able to service them well. What we need to do is to encourage them to go into groups. Some will call them cooperatives, some will call them associations, but then they must be in groups. Then two, because they are in groups, it is easier to target them and then service them. And then you make them to peer review each other. Say that if one is not doing well or is not doing it right, the other can prompt the person because they are collectively and jointly and severally responsible for failures when you give them the support. That's one. The other one has to, but not that they are mutually exclusive. The second point is that you should have the commercial farmers who are also around where the smallholders are. You let the smallholder farmers link up to the big commercial farmers who would buy their inputs either for processing or for onward transfer to the market. So you use the huge commercial farmers for them to service the smallholder farmers. For instance, the smallholder farmer in the area does not need to struggle to find transport to carry his produce to the market, but will just sell it to the big commercial farmer there, who would have either linked up with a big transporter who will come and convey everything. So the smallholder farmer goes back to his work and knowing very well that he has sent his produce to this big commercial farmer. And what I'm saying is not new, except that we need to replicate it. If you take the cocoa farmers, they don't carry their cocoa to the market themselves.
No.
They just sell it to the agents or the agents that buy, and then they will now carry it to cocoa board or to wherever it's going. Then the cocoa farmer goes back to continue with his work. So we can do that And that's why we need to let the two of them, the commercial farmers and the smallholder farmers, work together. You see? So this is how we can solve that problem. Otherwise, the smallholder farmers are too many that if you want to count them one after the other, you will not be able to do so. So they need to be in groups. Then they also need to be linked to the big commercial farmers.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.